Hey, this is John Lee Dumas, the founder and host of Entrepreneurs on Fire. And if you're wanting to learn how to embrace change and navigate through disruption as a leader, then listen to the Leadership is Changing podcast with my good friend, Denis Gianoutsos. He's prepared to ignite.
Welcome to Leadership is Changing. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change. This is taking your leadership to another level by finding the balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing with your host, Denis Gianoutsos.
Sure. Thank you so much, Dennis, for the opportunity to speak with you and to speak with your global audience. So, the Center for Urban and Racial Equity, we were founded to transform institutions and organizations and to promote equitable policies and practices, particularly within urban settings. The piece around transforming organizations and institutions is really critical for us as we're working in partnership and collaboration with organizations and government agencies to really build more equitable and inclusive organizations, institutions, and ultimately communities. And what we hope, it then extends to countries, right? And nations that are more equitable and just. And so we started working primarily with health and housing organizations within large cities where we're based in the US in Washington, DC, where here in the US, Black and Brown populations are largely reside in urban areas. And we were looking at trends over the past 20 plus years where we're seeing increasing inequality. And it really is beyond the US, right? Globally, we understand growing inequities within cities, that wealth inequality, income inequality, and certainly racial inequality, all of these inequities and injustices intersect. And so we thought it important to be able to build the capacity organizations, of institutions, of government agencies to be able to be more responsive, more collaborative with the communities that they are charged to serve. And so a lot of that work that we do, just to maybe get a bit more specific, is that we provide training. What is racial equity? How do you undo institutional and structural racism? Really building up leaders within organizations to be able to build equitable and just workplaces, as well as roll out programs and services that are also supportive of racial equity.
That's really fascinating stuff that you just actually shared there with us, Judy. And I've got to say to you, thank you for all the work you're doing with around who you work with people and so forth. I think it's really cool. Now, I forgot to ask before, whereabouts are you? You obviously have mentioned the US, but whereabouts are you in the world today?
Okay, so I am in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, sunny South Florida, not too far from Miami, where I was born in and raised, and most of my family still live in Miami.
Oh, wow. Wow. It's a beautiful place in the world too, because I've been to Florida and the humidity there is amazing, isn't it? Very amazing. But it's actually quite interesting. We were actually talking about it as a family last night and about the different places and humidity. And Mary, my wife, said to the family that it's amazing because we went to Florida and her hair outside just went ping, because it's just amazing what happens to your hair. And I don't actually have that problem, but that was really amazing to see that. Now, Judy, we're talking about you've talked about Cure and what you do there and helping people out and so forth, which is wonderful. The question I've got for you here is there anything else more about your background that you might want to share with our listeners?
Sure. So while we're on the conversation of where I am being in South Florida, so I was, as I mentioned, born and reared here in South Florida. My parents are immigrants from Haiti. My family started migrating to the U.S. in the late 60s, early 70s. And so I grew up with a lot of rich culture and diversity in South Florida, with lots of immigrants from the Caribbean, from South America, from Central America. My maternal grandmother had 7 kids. And so I grew up with lots of aunts and uncles and cousins around, which I also credit with helping me to learn how to navigate different personalities very early in life, because I was surrounded with so many colorful folks coming up.
Yeah, it's amazing how large families like that can actually help us develop and actually learn about humans and learn about the different personalities, as you said, and so forth. And sometimes they bring us back to reality too at times, families like that, because We do certain things around the place. Sometimes a comment or something they say, they're just down to earth, right? They're just people and they're a family, and it's just great to be around them, which is really
That's
quite
right.
cool to do. Now, early on, you were talking about what you do around Cure and what it is and so forth. And I know a lot of organizations, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this. They talk about diversity and inclusion. They said, oh, it's a leadership thing and we need to do a diversity and inclusion. I mean, what do you mean you need to do diversity and inclusion? And I think a lot of organizations spend a lot of time on the D, the diversity, but they forget the inclusion piece. What are you seeing out there in the marketplace?
That's such an important question. And when you, like for us at Cure, we were really focused on the equity piece of the DEI or the diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? Is that, yes, that a lot of organizations and companies focus on the diversity, which is really representation, right? The number of people across, say, gender and race and ethnicity and ability that we have represented, say, as employees within our organization or as part of our leadership team. And all of that is critical and important. And it's the foundation for equity and for inclusion is that we have to be diverse. But that certainly is not enough, right? Like it is the minimum, but not sufficient, right? For us to have inclusion and for us to have equity. So diversity is a baseline. How we even begin to have a conversation about inclusion if we don't have diversity. Certainly, diversity is important. But the I and the E are even more critical. Inclusion, right, is about participation. It's about creating the culture and the environment where the voices of diverse people and communities and backgrounds are heard and valued and prioritized, right? It is the experience that we are having together and we're able to leverage the power of diversity by being inclusive, by creating inclusive workplaces and cultures and environments. And certainly when we get to equity, we're even moving beyond inclusion to challenge existing structures and processes and decision making so that we are really building equitable workplaces, organizations, and communities. And so we need diversity. So that is an opening, it creates the opening for inclusion, right? And then equity pushes us even further is that now that we have diverse representation and that we are creating the space and the opportunity to leverage the power of diversity, is then that means certainly that changes are going to happen, right? If you're really being inclusive and listening and honoring the wisdom of the representation that you have been able to foster by focusing on diversity, then we are going to hopefully move to equity. But that is also an intentional process, right? We don't move towards equity without intentional and deliberate commitment, sustained commitment, and being really clear that we want to change things, right? That we don't want to continue, say, a legacy of injustices, of inequality, of racism and social inequality. And so now, what is it that we need to do? How do we change our organization, our workplace, and build towards equity?
So, Antonio, a massive welcome to you.
Denis, welcome. Thank you for hosting me here. It's a pleasure to be at your podcast. I heard great things about leadership is changing. And so, yes, I look forward to this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Antonio, just let our listeners know, whereabouts are you in the world today?
Well, I'm from Spain. I spent quite some time there. Today, I'm in Brussels, Belgium, which is a bit my hub as well. Brussels, Belgium, here in Europe.
Oh, Europe. So you're wonderful. Great place to be. And so must be nice and early in the morning for you as we go into the evening here. Now, Antonio, we've just given the listeners a brief introduction to you. Tell us a little bit more about your background. Is there anything else you'd like to share?
My background is very global. When I was a kid, I lived in many countries. My parents were moving from Spain to Mexico, to Italy, to Germany, so I've been raised very global, open mindset. I started to work in a tech company called Unisys in Amsterdam. Then I moved into consulting, big consulting. And since very early, I really enjoy working in projects. I had a day job, which was more a process analyst, processing orders, and I found that a bit boring. They asked me if I wanted to join a project, and I loved that. It was like every day was different. But still, I had my day job, which was processing orders. But at one point, I managed to move into projects, and I specialized in projects. I realized how difficult they were to manage, to make them successful. And that made me to think that if one project is difficult to manage, how do you manage 100 projects or 1,000? And that led me to researching. And one of the key points in my career was when I was fired from this big consulting firm where the senior partners told me, Antonio, we love your passion around projects and project management, but this is a boring topic. It's not something that we can sell. It's something that is tactical, is not strategic, like marketing, R&D, branding, innovation, agile, all this stuff. And that was a trigger for me to say, I need to change that. I think projects are critical. Project management is critical for every leader to understand, to build the competencies. So this is a very long introduction, but this was a key moment to say, okay, I'm going to change that. I need to think, how can I make these senior leaders understand that their futures are their projects? And if they don't spend time on it, the future of their organizations is at stake. So a long story to just say that my passion started when I was fired. And I thank the partners for that. This is about 20 years ago. And from there, I kept working. I'm still a practitioner working banking for 7 years through the highs and the crash in 2007 and 8. Then I moved into pharma. Now I'm working on sustainability. But at the same time, I started to teach. I teach because I was a terrible student and I thought teaching has to be fun. Teachers have to be able to teach in a different way than just asking people to memorize books. So I've been teaching in business schools for also around 15, 20 years. And from there, I went into writing and I published last 6 months ago, just today, Harvard Business Review Project Management Handbook, which was probably one of the greatest personal achievements for me, being published by HBR, so that finally senior leaders understand the importance of projects for their business or themselves.
Oh, wow. Congratulations on that. That's wonderful news. And Harvard Business Review, brilliant. I think that's really good. And
Thank
yeah,
you.
thankfully they did fire you when they did. So then you could actually do something about it and make
Thank
it
you.
fun as well, which is important. Now, I noticed that we talked about before in the introduction that about central issues on every CEO's 2030 agenda. And I presume that's around project management and how it's important for organizations moving forward. Anything else you want to share about that?
Sure, I think there is an issue with the word project management. Sounds very tactical, shows engineering, IT. It's nothing that it's a fancy topic to call in a boardroom or an executive board. So I started to talk more about managing projects, managing your future through projects. And that's where people resonate. One of the biggest challenges that CEOs and senior leaders have today around the world is that they have more projects than employees because they have grown, they launch so many initiatives, especially in this time where change is so fast. Competition is so aggressive that you need to constantly evolve your business, your products. So you find out yourself with more projects than employees, and they still need to do their job. So I get a lot of calls from senior leaders saying, listen, how do I prioritize? How do I prioritize? I don't even know the number of projects that we have today, really. So I just don't know. It has become such a big issue where people don't really know the amount of projects they do, where the people work, what the investment they do, and especially what's the benefit that they're expecting to get from all these projects. So that's how it's becoming today. That's where I get a lot of questions is, can you please help me? I manage the operations. The operations are easy to manage. Most of it is automated today. And we have Lean Six Sigma and everything. But that part of the change where we need to focus more today, it's just a black box and I need help. Please, Antonio, can you help us? So it's a bit more than just project management as we used to know it. It's more about working and leading an organization in a changing world, which is operations not so important anymore.
Yeah, cool. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that because it is a changing world, which is great. Now, tell me something in relation to project management. I actually agree with you. I think it could have been a different title, could be whatever it is, but it's really important. And I find that a lot of actually project management, program management, and things like that, a lot of the guys who are the leaders of those projects or initiatives or whatever they are, people don't have a solid line direct into them. They don't report into them. It's more of a matrix organization, a dotted line. and they may be coming in for that project work. So I think, in my view, and I would love to hear what you think about this, Antonio, is that I think that being a leader of a project is more important than a person who's a direct leader. What do I mean by that? Because you have to be more influential. They don't report to you. Their compensation and benefits aren't associated with you. And so you have to be more influential to get them to do things. What's your thoughts on that?
I totally agree, Denis. I think what makes it interesting but challenging is when they ask you, can you lead this transformation? It goes across the organization. And previously, maybe you had an operating team or a marketing team or finance team. That I would see more as a management role, right? Is you manage day-to-day operations, day-to-day activities. It's just putting targets for the people. You see them every day. So that's for me is the management of the operational world, which in the past was 80-90% of the activities in a business. Today, with the automation, robots, operation shrinks radically. So what you find out today is most people working project-based. And leadership is where it comes into play here, because is what you say then is, wow, these people don't report to me anymore. I don't see them every day. I have conflicts with resources. That person, which is key for my project, is working in 3 other projects and has no time. People change their mind with what they wanted. So suddenly I need to start thinking about how I can influence the organization in a different way, how I can influence my team, which doesn't report to me, and I cannot reward it. There's very few organizations who reward people for success in their projects. KPIs, rewards are mostly operational driven. So how can I make them excited for them, yet I don't have any means to compensate them? Just words and just caring and just motivating to get better in their jobs. And then a big part where I focus a lot is I also need to lead and influence my bosses, right? When you have in an operation role, you just follow orders. They come from the top. But here, no, I need to tell a CEO sometimes, listen, you're not doing your job, CEO, because you're not showing up in my meetings. You want this project to happen, then you need to be there. Really, I need you. So it just changes completely leadership. So I really like when I heard your podcast it's just spot on. It's leadership has to change if you want to succeed in today's world.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leadership is Changing with your host, Denis Gianoutsos. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change, inspiring executives and leaders to adapt and lead a bigger game in a fast-moving world.